Hello everybody, welcome to my first YouTube video on this channel. It's so lovely to have you all here. A lot of you, I'm assuming, will know me from Book Talk, which is insane. To anyone who doesn't know me, hi. This is Merciful Books. And today, looking at the very lovely title of this video, we will be talking about Hamnet. Also guys, this will be a completely spoiler-free review. If you're thinking about reading this book, I think this is a great video to encourage you to read it. But also, you know, nothing's gonna be spoiled. You're all good, you're safe, trust. So I'm gonna be splitting this video up into two different parts because I think that Hamnet can speak for two different types of audiences, and I kind of want to cover both of them. First of all, we have like the person who knows nothing about Shakespeare, nothing about his family, Shakespeare novice. And then we have Shakespeare nerds. Now, I will say, I unfortunately fall into that category. Well, unfortunately for some, not to brag, but I mean, have we not seen this the entire video so far? So we'll get to that. We'll get to why I am in that category when we get there. But I first want to speak about it just in terms of a normal reader, which I assume a lot of you guys will be. So to begin, Hamnet as just a book is beautiful. It's perfection. I cannot see why anyone wouldn't enjoy it because this isn't Shakespeare. This isn't written as a Shakespearean text, and you know, Shakespeare's not really in it. If anyone's seen Jack Edwards talk about this, you'll know this already, but I will repeat his beautiful sentiments. Shakespeare is never mentioned as Shakespeare in this book. You never hear the name William or Shakespeare at all throughout the entire book. And I agree with Jack Edwards when he says that he loved that because it gave the other characters agency. I'll get to this in a bit, but like as someone who studied Shakespeare, you know, it's always Shakespeare's wife, Shakespeare's children. Hamnet is Shakespeare's child. It's never Hamnet, his own agency, you know? So that was fucking refreshing. I think that also makes this book a lot more approachable to people who know nothing about Shakespeare. Because this book isn't about Shakespeare, that means that we're not getting the Shakespeare story. We're getting a story that anyone can connect to. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tale about love and grief. I would say a lot about the place of women, specifically in Shakespearean, Elizabethan times, but also, I mean, you could definitely take this and reflect it now. There is so much relatability in this book, which seems impossible for something set during Shakespeare's time. Like, how can you relate to them? And I think that kind of also speaks to our King's plays. I mean, the fact that they have remained popular in our canon for so long is because they're so similar to this book in that they deal with prevalent themes in our society that we connect to as readers. No matter who you are, there is something here for everybody. Everyone's gonna have these feelings because it is a very feeling-driven plot. I say this because nothing happens in this book, and I think that that is a point where a lot of people would turn away from this book. I think there is sort of a beauty in that will kind of trip a lot of people who don't read frequently up. It's done in a way that is semi-approachable, in that, yeah, you can understand every word in this, you can follow it, you know what's going on, but also you're like, when are we getting to the end? Because it's slow. Like, for example, I'm a fast reader, but the last 100 pages of this book took me 3 hours to read. But I think that's more of a reflection on me. Like, I didn't want this book to end. But I think that's kind of the only thing that would prevent like an average person that just walked into a bookshop and picked a random book up from reading this book, because it is so much more, and like that is just a component of it that ties into the themes. And I think the themes are what keep you staying around. It's just about getting into the momentum of the story. And it's not for everybody, obviously, but I think this book is a really, really good way to sum up how impactful this book is for people who don't even know Shakespeare, don't care about Shakespeare, aren't Shakespeare fans, are just normal readers, right? This quote, this passage, I think really shows how well crafted this book is and how much this book can like really touch your soul. In the early weeks of her marriage, Agnes collects impressions as a wool gatherer hoards wool. A tuft from here, a scrap from there, a few strands from a fence, a bit from a branch, until until you have a whole armful, enough to spin into yarn. Now, that quote I bookmarked and was like, you are making this video. Because this isn't a spoiler, don't worry, but Agnes grew up on a sheep farm and is like a farm girl. She's a horse girl, no, she's a country girl. And so this comes a little bit, it's about 150 pages into the book, and she's trying to accustom herself to a different life. And just like the symbolism and the imagery and the emotion behind those words of her being completely displaced in a new area that's so unfamiliar to her, but she still clings to what is familiar. Wool, gathering tufts from other people. And I think that is such a beautiful way to say that she is observant, because you could just say she is observant, but no, she is a wool gatherer. And it's that kind of language that I think is so beautiful and that everyone should just read. I mean, come on. How have I talked about this for 13 minutes? Oh my God. Let's do a little bit of background on me first. So as we can clearly see, I'm a bit of a Shakespeare nerd. I should preface this and say that I've only just finished my degree, so I have a Bachelor of Arts and I major in English. One of my focuses was Shakespeare, so I did all the Shakespeare courses at my university because I'm a loser. So this is one of 2 copies I own of the complete works of William Shakespeare. And I know that sounds stupid, but there is a reason for it. Hold on. So this is my other copy of the complete works of William Shakespeare. I actually got this as a gift, so that's kind of why I have 2 copies, but I have not read this one. It's so beautiful. Oh my God. Anyways, so the reason I have 2 copies is because I actually wrote in that one. If I can get it down and not knock anything, cool. So also this one is just very broken. It's very old. Which I love, but like, so I've read like this entire book, like there's notes completely throughout, like, so yeah, I'm a Shakespeare nerd. So I think that kind of proves my status as not a Shakespeare expert, but a very huge fan. So as I said, I studied Shakespeare. I studied Shakespeare so fucking much. It's insane. So I know a lot about Shakespeare's life, his family, his plays. I know how he writes. I understand what he writes, not to brag. And so yeah, huge fan. But I also studied him, so I'm like an academic fan as well. So I knew what was going to happen in the end of this book. And typically I don't like knowing that in books. I don't mind it, but it's just kind of like, oh, why am I reading this? I know what's going to happen. And I think a good example of that is Song of Achilles for me. My degree has been a bit turbulent, suffice to say. So I originally started as a history major with a minor in classic history. I did a year of studying the classics. Yes, I've read the classics. I didn't particularly like it. It got a bit too much for me, and I decided to drop and change my minor to English literature. And then in like my final semester of my degree, I switched my major to be English literature and my minor is history. So when I picked up this book, I knew exactly what was going to happen. And yes, I still cried. Of course I still cried. Oh my God, are you kidding me? But it wasn't a lot of crying for me. There are videos of me on the internet crying. A lot. So yeah, I'm a very big crier when I read, but this didn't affect me as much as it did other people. And that's not anything on the author, Madeline Miller, my fucking queen. It's just because I knew what was going to happen. So it didn't impact me as much as it did other people. But I know that a lot of people would have known what was going to happen and still were impacted. But for me, it kind of ruined it. It's just like every reader is different, I guess. That's what we're going to sum this up with. But I think that these 2 books are written very similarly. Like whoa, it's crazy. But this one made me cry so much more. And this one I love so much more. So if you've read Song of Achilles, you will love this book. Like, trust me, you don't need to be a Shakespeare fan. You don't need to be me to love this book. I think that that's kind of a given because these 2 books are so similar in style. I think that this quote really links it. And that's like the most popular quote from the book. So you all probably already know it. Everyone say it together. He is half of my soul, as the poets say. That simplicity the beauty of that. Earlier I was saying that I didn't particularly like this book compared to this book, but I was reading some of my tags and just shit. This hits hard. I take back everything I say. I think another quote that really links these two books together, and specifically if you like this book you will love Hamnet, is because they share the same themes and they really develop them beautifully. So I think this part as well. Had she really thought I would not know him? I could recognize him by touch alone, by smell. I would know him blind by the way his breaths came and his feet struck the earth. I would know him in death at the end of the world. That beautiful language, just wow. And Hamnet completely shares that same textual quality. This section here really shows how similar this book is to Song of Achilles in terms of storytelling and how language is treated, which I think is so important specifically for this book. It says, he feels again the sensation he has had all his life, that she is the other side to him, that they fit together, him and her, like two halves of a walnut, that without her he is incomplete, lost. He will carry an open wound down his side for the rest of his life, where she had been ripped from him. How can he live without her? He cannot. It is like asking the heart to live without the lungs, like tearing the moon out of the sky and asking the stars to do its work, like expecting the barley to grow without rain. Just such beautiful language is in this book, and I think that is so important for like a Shakespeare-inspired text, because I mean, King Shakespeare invented everything. I think also another thing about Shakespeare that a lot of people feel is that Shakespeare is unapproachable, but also pretentious. Like, Shakespeare has become synonymous with seriousness and, you know, you can't touch Shakespeare, you can't change Shakespeare. But I think the one thing I learned from my degree is that Shakespeare would not give a fuck. Like, I mean, all of his plays, no matter how serious, there's a joke in there. He chucks us some funnies and we have a giggle. I think if you read Shakespeare, you can really take it as something very serious, and it does seem a bit pretentious, but it's not. It's funny and witty, and like, Shakespeare is a comedy king. And I think that a lot of people will pick up this book or will consider reading it and then not, because they're like, oh, it's Shakespeare. I mean, obviously it's not Shakespearean language, but it's based on him. Oh, that's boring. Oh, that's stupid. But, you know, not to spread the love for Shakespeare. I mean, I know he's a dead white man, but this isn't his life, but it is derived of elements of his life. And I think that it is so important that it discusses someone other than Shakespeare, because he is a dead white man, but he's also one man. What about his family? What about his life outside of plays? What about who he is detached from the figure, from the icon? And I think that this treats that very well. Obviously, Shakespeare fans will love this. And not just because it's Hamnet, but because it's Shakespeare retold. It's Shakespeare in a completely different light, but that it's done so beautifully. To answer the question, how does a Shakespeare nerd feel about Hamnet when they're a Shakespeare nerd? When they dedicate their degree to Shakespeare? Well, I mean, this is my review, so we'll just let that speak for itself. But it's perfect. It's literal perfection. This was so refreshing as someone who loves Shakespeare, loves his life, loves his work. This was just a beautiful piece of literature that allowed me to think about someone other than Shakespeare, because it's so easy, obviously, to get caught up in the allure of Shakespeare. I mean, come on. You would, I would, we all would. Buy Icon, okay? It's so easy because, you know, it's the bard. And I think that this took a topic that not a lot of people know about and turned it into something really beautiful that's not only approachable for people who know nothing about Shakespeare, but also for people who love Shakespeare. I mean, come on. Could any Shakespeare fan hate this? No, it's impossible. I'm telling you. I'm assuring you. Anyway, that was my rant about Hamnet. I hope you all enjoyed it. I spoke for too long, but please tell me what you thought about Hamnet if you've read it. If you haven't, tell me if you read it. I'd love to hear people who didn't like the book as well, because I think that that's a really interesting conversation. There's always value in hearing the opinions of others and whether or not people liked books. But I assure you, if you liked Song of Achilles specifically, or if you're just looking for a new read, give Hamnet a go. Thank you all so much for joining me on my very first booktube video, which is cray cray. Who knows when I'll be back with another one. Probably the next time I read a book and I have another thing to say, which is always, apparently. Feel free to give me a little subscribe. I post on TikTok every single day, so give that a check out. All my links will be below. Peruse it at your pleasure. Feel free to check out my Goodreads as well, because that's I'm pretty funny. Also, my intent with this channel is to prove that I actually do read books. I think that my Goodreads comes off as if I'm just joking around all the whole time. I promise I have critical thought. I have a degree. I can't hold it up because I don't have it yet, but it's somewhere. Anyways, thank you so much everyone for watching. I will see you all next time. Goodbye.